Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Spirituality with Ashley podcast. We are talking about the fear of connecting with spirit today. And when I say spirit, that's really synonymous with your higher self, your guides, your spiritual team. It's that connection with the unseen part of yourself, because honestly, really, your guides are technically also a part of you. They have to resonate with your specific energy. And I mean, it could probably be argued that, your guides are just other aspects of you, of your soul. And so that's what I want to talk about today, kind of my experiences that have scared the shit out of me and made me shut down a lot of my clairs, or led to me shutting down a lot of my clairsenses, and then how I reactivated them and kind of what that looked like and the process. So if you're somebody who has shut down some of your clairsenses or your gifts, or that inner deeper connection with your soul self and your spiritual team, if you're someone who shut that stuff down, or if you're somebody who is maybe a little apprehensive or scared to connect, or you have some blocks around that, we're going to talk about all of that, all the things. I was about to just get right in and be like, in my spiritual journey, in the very beginning, fear was a big thing for me. Trusting and dealing with the fear and being able to recognize my fear, because I think some of it was kind of hidden or suppressed, and I didn't even realize that I'd shut things down out of fear. So that's what I want to talk about today. It's very common. I know it's happened to a lot of people. A lot of us will shut things down in childhood for various reasons, and also in early adulthood. So I think it'll be helpful to talk about this. All right. So if you are interested in a reading, you can head over to my website, ashleybrickhouse.com. I offer a few different kinds of readings and energy healing. I am officially certified in the emotion code. So if you'd like an emotion code session to help you to identify and release trapped emotions, then definitely look into booking a session. And I think coming up, I'm going to do like discovery calls. So if you aren't sure which reading to get, or you're not sure if the emotion code would apply to you, you could book a free 15 to 30 minute call with me, and we can talk about like what would be best for you, and whether any of the readings would apply to what you're looking for help with. So look for that coming soon. And if you are on social media, you can find me with the same name across all the platforms, Spirituality with Ashley. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. And not just Spotify, you can find me on other podcast platforms. Right now, I'm just publishing to Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you can also listen to the podcast on YouTube. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this episode. So I had my first big spiritual awakening in 2020, and I really didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what a spiritual awakening was. Like, I had no idea. It was a big year. I learned a lot of stuff. I'm sure a lot of us did. Had a lot of shifts and changes and realizations and stuff in 2020. And as I was preparing for this episode, I made some bullet points about the specific spiritual experiences that kind of freaked me out. So when I was growing up, my mom was very open about her beliefs in supernatural things. I've always been really, really drawn to supernatural subjects, I guess. Like, I remember watching Matilda and The Craft and shows and movies and stuff like that, and trying to move things with my mind. Like, I've always been into it. My mom was very open about her experiences seeing ghosts, and she would share stories about like her aunt or great aunt who had an extraterrestrial UFO experience. I think I mentioned that in a previous episode. And so the subject of supernatural stuff and ghosts and like entities and all of that, like I've always been pretty comfortable with it. When I was growing up, I was very well aware that I did not see a lot of ghosts because I felt like I wasn't able to handle it calmly. And so my mom would see ghosts and tell us stories about it. She'd had so many stories about like entities and ghosts and stuff, and none of them were terrifying or scary stories. They were all pretty calm and chill and just like interesting experiences, I guess you could say. Like, she told me about one time we were, my younger sister and I, my younger sister's about 2 years younger than I am, and we were small kids under the age of 8, I'm pretty sure. And we were taking a nap, and my mom said it got cold in the room, and then she kind of felt this shift, like wind, I guess, a little bit. And then a little girl in a white dress started materializing, like appearing. So she was kind of see-through, and then I guess became more solid, not fully solid though. She stayed pretty translucent, but she kind of like materialized and started walking toward my mom, and then as she got closer and closer, she kind of faded out again. And so just kind of stories like that. And so I've always been very open to supernatural, unexplainable situations and things and experiences. And I used to watch a lot of horror movies. I was like, horror was my favorite genre for a while. And I've also had a lot of trauma in my life. And so eventually, I guess in the last few years, I stopped watching horror movies because my nightmares without horror movies, when I get very stressed or I'm going through a huge life thing, usually when I'm very stressed, I'll have a lot of nightmares. And that doesn't usually happen anymore. My spiritual awakenings, my spiritual journey has kind of shifted the way that I process and deal with things. So I don't really get into that kind of state anymore where I get really stressed and down and have a bunch of nightmares. However, I do think that when I was watching all of the horror movies, it did contribute to this underlying kind of fear-based mindset that I had about things. And like, it's almost like I forgot about my mom telling me all the chill stories about entities. And then I suddenly, because I was watching so many horror movies, my brain was like, well, this is scary. Like, entities are scary. Ghosts are scary. It's a negative thing. And it's so interesting because now I'll flip through the TV and I'm like, man, there's so much negativity that's perpetuated and promoted, whether it's with aliens or ghosts or entities or spiritual like seance stuff. Like, there's always just like a negative air about it. And I find that really interesting because generally my experience with entities and spirituality and stuff my experiences have been pretty positive. And even the ones that were uncomfortable for me weren't necessarily negative. And I just want to take this moment to put out a reminder that the lens we view things through is what determines the actual meaning. So you can choose to view something as positive, or you can choose to view something as negative. So things are not just inherently negative. It's a choice that we make. And I'm sure that can be argued, but that's not what we're here for right now. So anyway, I'm saying that because getting into some of these experiences that freaked me out, I used to look at some of them as being really negative, but now I have a different mindset. And so I don't think any of it is negative. I think one of them is still kind of scary, and I'm going to talk about that next. But for the most part, I think that the experiences were just me waking up, my clairsenses kind of, activating, and just, I think a lot of the trepidation around some of my experiences that freaked me out was just out of ignorance. I didn't know. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand how to deal with it. I didn't feel equipped with the tools that I needed to navigate what was happening, because things happen to me now and I'm fine. I understand, like, if I connect with something and I'm like, oh, I don't know about that, then I just, I say no and I keep it moving. I don't actually feel like I connect with very much negative stuff, though. I generally have very positive experiences, and I think that's probably because that's what I'm looking for. I try to be very positive, and so I feel like that's what I resonate with. That's what I give permission to. Light and love, high frequency, helpful energies, that kind of thing. I'm all about, growth. I probably use that word more than any other word in the English language. Growth, growth, growth. All right, so I'm going to take it back to when I was a teenager. My friends and I used to really go looking for trouble, as, teenagers do. And so I lived in Japan. I grew up in Japan. And when I was, I'm going to say mid-teens, because it was before I got obsessed with clubbing, because I definitely started going clubbing and binge drinking when I was 15. I had to have a ton of brain cells, because for me to still be a pretty functioning adult, like pretty well-functioning adult, like the amount that I drank. Anyway, so before I got really into clubbing and drinking and all of that, and I was hanging out with my friends, we would go to like old World War II like caves and bunker areas that are still around in Japan. And we went to this park one night, and we also found like closed off like houses where people were murdered and they sold the police tape. We went to like old shut down hospitals, stuff like that. We seriously were just like on ghost hunting missions. I don't know what we were thinking. We clearly were not thinking, because now my adult human brain would be like, I'm not going to go looking for random scary shit. But at that time, hey, it was the thing to do. So I remember this one time we went to this park at night. We were walking around. It's a beautiful park. It's it's got a lot of like nice cement walking paths and just really pretty trees and stuff. At night, the vibe shifts a bit and it can be a little creepy. And so my group of friends and I kind of split up. It was a lot of us. I want to throw out the number like 12 to 15 of us. And my memory is very vague. Like I said, I binge drank a lot when I was a teen. So my memory is not 100% there, but I remember it was a pretty large group of us. And so I split off with a smaller group, and I think it was maybe like 2 or 3 of us. And we were walking, and one of my friends who was probably messing around was like started freaking out, and she was like, "Oh my God, I see somebody hanging in that tree," which now that I'm telling the story, I'm like, she was 100% faking that. But the weirdest thing happened. So we were walking. I don't remember if it was before or after that. And and now I understand what it all meant. It was me sensing energy essentially. And I just didn't know anything about any of that. But that doesn't negate our ability to process, sense, and deal with energies. Just because we don't know that we're able to do it or how it feels doesn't mean it's not happening. And so we were walking down this path in wide open space. I was on a cement path, open space. We weren't like, I don't know. I feel like emphasizing that it was open space because it didn't seem like a creepy situation. It seemed very serene and peaceful and nice until we were walking. I got this feeling of dread and a little nausea, and it felt like I walked into a force field. Like, it felt like I hit an invisible wall and I could not move further forward. It was the weirdest feeling. Like, physically hit a force field, this invisible wall that was like, nope, you're not going any further. And it all kind of happened within the same amount of time where I started feeling really shitty. I felt a little bit nauseous. I felt dread. I felt this overwhelming feeling of like, nope, don't do that. Back up. And that's happened another time in another story, and I'm getting like goosebumps because I remember the feeling so vividly. I don't remember a lot of other details about the things that were happening around me, but I remember that experience. It was very jarring. And I was like, we need to turn around. And so we turned around, and I think they were like, what are you talking about? And I kind of explained what was going on, and they were just like, they did not get it, but I didn't give a crap. I was like, whatever, I'm turning around. Y'all can go. I will walk by myself and go back to the parking lot or whatever. And so we all did. We all turned around, and that was the end of that. Fast forward years later, probably about 10 years later. So I was in college in Miami, and I had a boyfriend who went through a severe psychotic break, and that's a story all in itself. And it was a really difficult time for his family, for me. It was a lot. It was a lot that was happening. And so because he needed medical attention, he went back to his home state, which was Massachusetts. And I went too. His family had a big house there, and it was summer. So I had the summer off from college. We were both seniors. And so we were really feeling the pressure, him especially, because he had a very demanding, challenging degree. And I'm trying not to give too many details because I don't, first of all, I don't think that they really matter for the story, but I want to set up the context of kind of what was going on. And I also want to respect his privacy. And anyway, so yeah, I was at his house, and like I said, it was an extremely stressful time. He wasn't the same person anymore. Like when I say severe psychotic break, I mean severe. So his personality changed, everything shifted. And I remember we were sleeping at first when I was staying at his parents' house, I slept on the floor in his room, his childhood room. And he had a twin bed, so he slept on the bed and I was on an air mattress on the floor. And his sister had a room across from his. And so at one point she wasn't there. And so we switched over to her room because she had a really big bed and it was more comfortable in there. And so we were sleeping in her bed in her room one night, and I just was not comfortable sleeping in that room that night with him for various reasons. And he was kind of unpredictable with all the things that he was experiencing. And so sometimes I just felt very uncomfortable and I also just couldn't sleep. And so I got up and I grabbed a pillow and I was like, I'm going to go sleep in his room. So I had my pillow under my arm and I walked across the hallway and I opened the door to his room. And as I opened the door and pushed the door open, I immediately saw a person standing directly in front of me across the room in front of the window. So because it was in front of the window and it was nighttime, there were no lights in there. I think there was some light coming in from outside, from the moon and stuff. And so I could see a silhouette of this figure with scraggly hair and a hat, like not a fedora, but like not a baseball hat either. It had a brim, like it had a brim, is that what it's called? A brim. Like, I don't want to say like a top hat, but I guess it could have been a top hat. It was like, it could have also been like a cowboy hat kind of a deal. It was a hat with a brim, and he had scraggly hair and like a trench coat deal. And it was a big male figure standing there, solid. Like, this was not a shadow, it was a solid figure. And I immediately got the same feelings that I had at the park. But I didn't think about that at the time. I was frozen, I was paralyzed. I was standing in the doorway with the pillow, paralyzed. Again, I had the nausea, I had this feeling of dread and just intense terror. And again, I'm getting goosebumps because it was one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had. And I remember feeling like I just need to leave. I need to get away as fast as possible. Like overwhelming terror. Holy crap. And something, because I felt like I couldn't move, but I like to attribute it to my amazing guides. Something almost kind of like pulled me back. And then I shut the door. I honestly think I never even took my hand off the door because I don't remember grabbing the doorknob. I just remember intense terror. And so I was just like, okay, I'm leaving this alone. I backed up, I closed the door, and then I went downstairs and probably didn't sleep the rest of the night. I don't even remember. And a few days later, I left. We broke up and I left. Some other things happened in addition to that. It was like after that happened, like things were already really bad. I was not having a good time there for various reasons. And things just kind of like the shit hit the fan and all kinds of stuff happened that was telling me like, you have to leave right now. His dad wasn't being very nice to me. His dad was actually being very disrespectful and not nice to me. And I was just generally extremely anxious and uncomfortable. And so I ultimately was like, I'm sorry, but I can't. Like, I have to look out for myself, and I have to go back to school in a few weeks. I'm going to go home. So my mom bought me a ticket, and I left the next day and flew to Italy. I think she was living in Italy at the time. And so it has taken me a really long time to process that experience, that whole summer, really. And so fast forward the story, I ended up, I think I was about 25, 26 maybe when that happened. And I graduated. Where was I going with this? Oh, I graduated. I joined the military. I got married. And then, so about, I don't know, a few years later, I was talking to my ex-husband's mom, and I was explaining the experience to her, and she was like, "Oh, that sounds like the Hat Man." And I was like, "What?" And she explained to me what the Hat Man is, this entity that feeds off of fear and pain and despair. And his family, my ex-boyfriend's family at that time, they were going through a lot of stuff too. And so that house, just the energy in that house was not amazing energy. And she told me that it was essentially a warning. He showed up to let me know, like, you either get out or you're going to get lumped in with this family, and I'm going to feed off you too. And so, yeah, I got out of there. And anyway, the experience was so terrifying. And then I actually had one of my close friends told me that I think I was talking to her about it, and she said that one of her cousins had a similar experience, and again, described the Hat Man. And it was wild because it was just so wild to me that other people knew about this entity and had similar experiences. And recently on Gaia, I actually saw an episode, I think it was George Norrie on his show, Beyond Belief. I think it was his show. And there was a woman on there who deals with a lot of the darker aspects of spirituality and stuff, like working with people on that kind of stuff. And she talked about the Hat Man and shadow people. And I thought that was so interesting because I was like, holy crap, how validating. And I also remember growing up in Japan and Japan has some freaking entities. Their culture around demons and entities and stuff is terrifying. If you've ever seen a Japanese scary movie that has to do with ghosts and stuff, oh my God, terrifying. But anyway, I remember at the end of high school, I think it was right after high school, we were living off base and in this brand new house that was built, and I used to see shadow people all the time. I would swear somebody was there, and I could see these shadows, and it would always be out of the corner of my eye, and I would just be like, "Mom? Heather?" Like, my sister is named Heather. I was just like, "Hello?" And there would be nobody there, and I constantly would see, like, shadow people moving around in the house. But I honestly, like I said, I didn't really think anything of it. I wasn't, like, terrified. I was just like, "Oh, nobody's here. It's just a ghost. Cool." And my mom has always had a lot of antiques, and so often there would be energies connected to that. There was an old lady connected to this old Chinese wedding bed that she had, and stuff like that. And so if you ever slept in that bed, like, your dreams are always so vivid and weird. Like, it was such an interesting experience. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, so the Hat Man was one of my most pivotal, I don't know, scary spiritual experiences that freaked me out. And I feel like that was one of the occurrences that caused my rejection of clairvoyance, because I was like, that was terrifying. I don't want to see scary stuff. Like, it was very off-putting. Life is hard enough and challenging enough. I don't want to see extra stuff. I don't want to see scary entities in the middle of the night in dark rooms. Not here for it. So I think that's when I shut that down. In 2020, when I went through my first huge spiritual awakening, a lot of my clairsenses started opening up again. I was ready to, like, dive back into spirituality and really explore and learn and remember who I was and really embrace that part of myself. And I didn't know about all of the clairs at the time. It was the very beginning of my spiritual journey, so I didn't know anything really. And I was just kind of experiencing stuff. I was meditating a lot. I was learning about crystals. I was learning about binaural beats and spirit guides. And I was learning about my soul blueprint and the Akashic records and pendulums and that kind of stuff. And so as I was meditating, I think it was probably about 2 or 3 months into my deep meditation practice. I was meditating for hours every single day. And I was taking a shower. I was taking a shower at one point, and I heard somebody scream my name. And I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment by myself. And so it startled the crap out of me. I turned the shower off and I put a towel on and I walked around my apartment to see who screamed my name, because it sounded like it came from my front door. Scared the crap out of me. There was nobody there. I checked everywhere. And so I was like, okay, well, whatever. I got back in the shower. Shortly after that, I was sleeping and I was awakened to somebody whispering my name at the foot of my bed. And I just heard Ashley, a loud whisper. And I was like, oh, nope, not here for this. I don't like it. I don't want this. And then I also had another experience, which was very vividly positive, or at least not negative at all. At the very least, it could have been neutral, where again, I was in the shower and one of my guides, who I now actively and openly communicate with, but at the time I was like, wait a minute. One of my guides, while I was in the shower, I could hear his voice and he started talking to me and introduced himself. And I was just like, oh my God, this is wild. And that was really exciting. After the screaming of my name and the whispers that woke me up and me just hearing things, I realize now that was my clairaudience being activated. And so my guides and other entities and spirits and stuff, probably mostly my guides, were just kind of reaching out, interacting with me. And yeah, it scared the crap out of me. My mom at the time, mentioned that it might be negative. She was very much into all the conspiracy theory stuff though. So she also wasn't super in her love and light area she could have been in energetically. She was all about the darker aspects. She was very enthralled, very interested. It's really human nature. Kind of car accidents. We all want to see what happened, that kind of a deal. So I'm not faulting her. And it was really my choice and her opinion. I really valued her opinion. And so when she was like, oh, I went into your records and it said that it's really negative, you're channeling negative stuff, I was like, what? And it freaked me out. And I just looked up to her because she'd been on her spiritual journey for a whole, 6 months prior to mine. So I think she'd been on it for about a year before I fully started really awakening and having the experiences and stuff that I was having. And so when she said that it was negative, I immediately went back to my horror movie days mindset. And I was like, oh, shutting all that down. And so I stopped meditating. I think I'm still into crystals, but I was like, I don't want to meditate. I'm not opening myself up. I kind of looked at it like I was this bright light, just putting off light. And so I was so scared that I was putting off all this light. I didn't want just random entities to see that I was putting off all this light and didn't really know what was going on. Now I think it's awesome. And I'm like, I put off all the light, because if I do catch something's attention, I understand how to navigate dealing with it. But at that time I was like, oop, nope, I'm just going to dim my light and back up and shut this down and close that door. So I feel like I pretty much shut down most of my clairsenses. And so when you shut down your gifts, whether it's in childhood, whether it's young adulthood, you are always able to reactivate them, to give yourself permission to open yourself back up. Because that's essentially what you're doing, is you're opening yourself up energetically for to be able to tune in to your senses on a deeper level. That's really all that is. And so part of being able to regain access to your gifts or your clairsenses, part of being able to do that comes with giving yourself permission. And I think that one of the more helpful things that I did was educating myself. I learned about grounding. I learned about protection. I learned how to open myself up and connect responsibly. And through doing that, it created safety and security, where I felt safe and better equipped to navigate and explore other realms and dimensions and energies. And it took me a while. It took me a while to be able to really open back up, because I wanted to. I wanted to open back up. And this was like, I don't know, the next year or 2 years later, during my next spiritual awakening, because my higher self was like, we are not just going to hang out in the dark ages. You are going to go through this again. You're going to wake up. This is part of your plan. You can try to shut it down, but we're going to keep waking you up again. So in 2022, I think it was 2022, I dove back in to spirituality, like hardcore dove back in. And I was still dabbling in it in 21, but not nearly at the extent that I was initially in 2020. And so when I had my next pretty hardcore spiritual awakening, actually it was 2023, I had the next hardcore one. I felt some of my gifts start to reawaken, and I was cool with it. And we started, and I say we as in my spiritual team and myself, we started with the ones that felt safer. So claircognizance felt less jarring for me. It took a while for my clairvoyance to reactivate or kind of turn back on. And I've only recently been able to tap back into the clairaudience. And I noticed that the more I understood about how my gifts presented themselves, and the more I understood how to work with them and kind of understand how they were coming through for me, the better able I was to hone them and accept kind of what was happening. And honestly, when I decided like, okay, I'm ready for my gifts to surface again, just me deciding that did not reactivate them, because I still had that fear from the experiences that I went through. I still had that fear in me. And honestly, if you've had experiences, if you're scared, if you've had some spiritual experiences that have created fear in you, that's something you can actually use the emotion code for to help release any trapped emotions, because you can trap the emotion of fear, you can trap the emotion of terror. And so by releasing those emotions, that can open you back up, because you're getting rid of that vibration that you're holding from that emotion. And so it allows your vibration to be in more harmony. So if you are interested in regaining access to your gifts, the emotion code is a modality that you can probably use for that. I honestly, it popped into my head the other day because I was talking to one of my friends, and I was like, oh man, that would be great. You can definitely use the emotion code for having a more abundant mindset, inviting more abundance into your life, getting rid of blocks, because trapped emotions can create blocks and stuff for you, just like they can with your clairsenses. And so that's definitely an avenue. I didn't use the emotion code when I was opening myself back up, though. I did. So once I gave myself permission and I was like, I want to experience these gifts, I then revisited the experiences that I had, and I started shifting the way that I interpreted them. So the Hat Man was a scary experience, but when I was regaining access to my gift and giving myself permission to experience clairvoyance again, I chose to look at it from a perspective of, well, I have the ability to see energies. I have the ability to see spirits. And because I understand that I am empowered and a powerful being, I can choose what kind of interactions I have. And so being in a more empowered place and understanding like my gift and being thankful for it, having gratitude that I'm able to access clairvoyance and see things, like that's amazing. And so I kind of shifted my mindset about it, and then I practiced by I would meditate, and I would set the intention right before I meditated that I wanted to visually interpret messages from spirit. And so then I started having more visual experiences. And so I started, And I also think that doing readings, when I started doing readings, all of my clairs kind of started to kick back on. And it was really interesting because even though I didn't experience a ton of clairvoyance on my own when I was meditating, if I was doing a reading for somebody who was super clairvoyant, or very visual, which usually means you have, you're more predisposed to be a strong clairvoyant, I noticed that I would get a lot of images. And so I would be describing the images that I was seeing, or the little clips or movie scenes that I was seeing. I would be describing that to the person that I was doing the reading for. And I thought it was so interesting. And I'd always be able to tell people what their gifts were because of the way that I would interpret, the way that their guides would give me the information to relay to them. And I just thought that was so interesting. That I just was able to kind of like adapt to whatever the person's gift was in order to be able to interpret the information and relay it to them. I just think that's so interesting. But yeah, so really the 4 steps for being able to reactivate your gifts or re-access them is, first, give yourself permission. Decide that you want to have access to that gift. You want to experience that connection to that deeper way of sensing and interpreting information. The second part is creating safety and security. Find a ritual, find a safe space, figure out what makes you feel good about connecting. I also one of the things I like to do is I'll light a candle. I always sit in my room and I will light a candle, a white candle. And as I'm lighting the candle, I always say I invite in the highest frequency of love and light. And I only consent to connect with, high vibrational, helpful, loving energies that are for my highest good. And that gave me a lot of safety and security. And I also like to spray purifying spray. I've got this rosemary sage spray. It smells so good. Or I'll use Florida water and I'll just kind of spritz it in my space and spritz it on myself. And I just set up a ritual that made me feel protected and good. And I would always ask my spirit guides, like, hey, calling you guys in, just look out for me, protect my energy, look out, The third thing that I learned to do was grounding and protection. And I kind of already touched on the protection thing in the second step of creating safety and security. The grounding thing was really big for me. I didn't even realize what an important step that is, to really ground your energy in, connect with the earth, allow Mother Gaia's energy to support you and, send you that healing, high resonance, high frequency energy and hold you down, so that you don't get too floaty, so that you don't, I don't want to say float away, but I feel like when you ground, one of the bigger lessons I learned was that the deeper you ground, the higher you can go in your higher chakras with connecting with spirit. And so grounding also helped me to feel very protected and safe. And I have a whole visualization thing that I do now when I'm grounding, as far as I connect my roots into the earth. I sit against this grandmother tree that helps me to dispel any negativity. And I have my guides. I always have 2 guides with me, and we kind of make a triangle with each other where we're touching. And whatever resonates with you for your grounding and protection practice. But I do think that it's important to be responsible with your energy. Even if you don't subscribe to the negative stuff, I think that because, they're just like with humans, there are humans that are good and helpful, and there are humans that are not so great and want to hurt other people. And so that applies to energies also. And so it's important to just be mindful of your energy, what you're putting out there, and how the boundaries that you're setting energetically. So yeah. And then the 4th step is practice your skills. I think I wrote a blog post about it, about, the Clairsenses, and I gave a bunch of exercises for each of the Clairsenses, and just doing that, practicing. Sometimes I like to when I was regaining access to my clairaudience, I like to go and walk in nature and just listen, see how many different sounds I can pick out, and just really focus on what I'm hearing with my ears. I don't know why I said with my ears. I don't hear with any other part of my body. But yeah, that really helped me. There are some other exercises you can do. I found some people on TikTok that had some clairaudience exercises, which were really cool. And they take like a minute or 2 minutes. It's not even a huge time commitment. So I highly recommend, if you would like to reactivate your clairs, you can get an emotion code session. You can look up practice exercises. You can go to my blog on my website. I wrote a whole blog post about your clairs. Learn grounding and protection techniques. And yeah, remember to give yourself permission and come from a place of love, not fear. You are always in charge of how you choose to view things, of your mindset, of your perspective. You choose the lens that you wear. So choose a lens that's going to make you feel good and that's going to invite positive, uplifting experiences. That is my advice, my unsolicited advice. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I love, love, love doing these episodes. Again, or as always, if you liked the episode or something really resonated with you, tag me in a post about it, like share a story, share the podcast with somebody else who you think would enjoy it or benefit from it. And as always, reach out to me. Let me know what you thought. Throw some ideas for stuff you want to hear about my way. Throw some ideas my way for stuff you want to hear about. Yeah. All right. Until next time, sending you all the love.